Hello and welcome to this Developer Skill Sprint. It's my pleasure to be taking you through today. My name is Stephen Ball and I'm the Associate Product Manager here for Interbase and also Product Evangelist on the RAD side. So I get the fun of spending a lot of my time playing with Delphi and RAD Studio. So if you want to reach out to me, my Twitter handle is @DelphiABall. But the content that we're going to go through today, the key link you'll see on the bottom of the next few slides is just the shortcode embt.co/sprint-azure-translation, which gives you some clue to the fact that today's skill sprint is about using the Azure Translator service, which Microsoft provide through their cloud APIs, and how we can use that to automatically do text translation, and actually beyond that you can actually do text to audio as well, which is really useful. So this skill sprint is designed to work with RAD Studio and also with the app method released from April 2015. It will work basically with anything that is RAD Studio XE5 and above, because that's when the REST components were introduced. So you should be able to use this code on any version from them forward. I've only tested it on XE8, but I will provide a link to the code that I could take you through today, the sample. It's fully downloadable for you. Because the translation service from Azure is a REST-based service, it's actually available for Windows, Mac, iOS and Android through a common code base that we're going to build here. So that allows us to write it for once and have the same facility working across our VCL and our FireMonkey applications, which is pretty cool. So what we're covering today, basically we're going to be looking at expanding and using the REST components. We're going to go through a full example of connecting up to the Azure Marketplace, and I plan to take you right the way through my journey from finding the service, finding the cloud API, going through the documentation, finding snippets from different code samples that have helped along the way, and then putting it all together to be able to use with Delphi and being able to then go ahead and actually take it to the next step of wrapping it up in some components to provide some specific helper functionality that makes it very easy to then deploy multiple times through multiple applications. And the great thing is that work's been done, so you can take those components at the end and use those in your code. But I want to take you through so you can learn how to do this for other places and share alike. So we will be looking at the REST components, we'll be looking at different types of parameters that the REST components take, and also to communicate with the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. There is an authorization token that you need to get. That authorization token has a shelf life of 10 minutes, so you need to manage that within your code. If your application is running for 12, 15 minutes or even longer, then you're going to need to re-request that authorization token. So we look at techniques for being able to cache that and work with that through our code as well. So I really want to get straight away from the slides and into it, so to speak. So for the demo today, we're going to start off in the IDE, and I'm going to take you through actually the application running first, and then we're going to work backwards through the actual components and then going through the documentation to find out the information that we needed, have a look at the different setup on the components. So first of all, let's just go ahead and run this example. I'm going to run it as a local Win32. First thing is we need to do an authorization, which passes this client secret and the client ID, which we get at the point that we register an application. And then with the data that we've got come back, we're then able to use the authorization token to call the translate service. So here I'm just going to translate from English to let's do to Spanish. Happy birthday. And here we can see the translation. And we can see the translations come back as part of an XML string. So we'll look at how we get that data out a little bit later as well. I'm just going to turn my volume up so hopefully you can hear when I hit play.
Feliz cumpleaños.
I'll just do that one more time.
Feliz cumpleaños.
So that's how you say happy birthday, and audibly in Spanish as well. So let's have a quick look here. The first option here is to get the authorization token. So we're passing in to a couple of parameters that we've got set up, and I'll take you through how we got those parameters in the first place. A client secret and a client ID. And we're then just calling the execute method on the REST request. And what that does is the REST request here uses the REST client as the gateway. In fact, it's this one here. So this is using the client here as the gateway. This almost like the database connection, and this is the query to the database, if you think kind of database components. And then what comes back is the data set, and that kind of appears then in the response component. So those three work together to allow us to communicate with the server. So let's have a look here. We can see that the base URL is the data market for the access control to get the authorization token. And what we're calling is the OAuth 2-13 request, which is a post. There's some parameters that are passed in, which we have set here: client ID, client secret, grant type, and scope, which are hard-coded in here. And then the response comes back from that. So all we're doing is literally set those parameters that we need to set, execute it, we get the response back. We're then able to get the access token that's returned, and then go ahead and set that on the other request that we have here. And then I'm just putting it out onto screen just for example purposes, but you wouldn't normally do that in a live application. So the two queries that we're going to use for the translate and the play, here we've got some parameters that have been set as the resource, and they're going out through the base URL that's different this time because it's to the Microsoft Translation Service. The request parameters, when we do the translate, we're just sending the translated text from and to. This is the languages. The actual text is getting set here by a live binding. So here we can see that the params text is being set up for the actual text that we're going to be passing through. And then what comes back as the content is what we're putting out at the bottom. So reasonably straightforward. We've got one bit to get the auth token, and then another set on the other side to come out the other end. Now, what we do have this side here, though, is you can see here the resource is translating text and from and to. But there's also some other parameters here. So the authorization, which is the authorization token that we get from the auth request, is a different type of parameter. So we actually have to come in and manually add that here, and we tell it what type of parameter. So you can have cookies, you can have get and post, you can have URL segments. URL segments are what we're passing in as the URL string. And if you notice on the authorization, they're get and post, so a different type of parameter again. And that's important. We need to find those and work out how we get those. Getting to the bottom of that took a little bit of time to work those out, but it's all in the documentation, and when you read the documentation properly rather than just skimming over it, it's very easy to find. So I want to take you into how I worked through that initially, and to do that we're going to jump back to the Amazon Azure Web Services and have a quick explore there, and also go through the documentation and see how we can actually get to this point in time. So I'm going to start on the Microsoft Azure website. In fact, let's just close a few of these quickly. This is the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, and here you can see there's applications, there's data. The data is really where we're interested in at the moment. I'm subscribed up to the Microsoft Translator service, and there's a whole wealth of different categories of data that you can communicate with REST that can really expand and bring great value to existing VCL and cross-platform FireMonkey applications. So literally just go find the translator service. I've signed up to the 2 million characters a month service, which is free tier. Doesn't cost me anything to do translations up to 2 million characters a month. If I want to go beyond that, then I can just pay whatever the cost is for going beyond. I think it equates to about $40 for 4 million characters a month. So basically it tells you here that this Microsoft Translation service is a web API. It enables automatic translation, machine translation of text between any of the 50 supported languages, which is fantastic. It tells us also that this is used in Microsoft products such as Office, SharePoint, Lync, Yammer, Visual Studio and Bing. So even the web browser that Microsoft provide and Bing uses this service. So this is something that's being well maintained. So I was like, yep, great, sign me up. I'll have some free of that. The get started then helps you as a developer get going. So the first part is basically taking you through going and signing up. So you can do that yourselves. Pretty straightforward. Just put in your name and off you go. The second part though is registering your application and creating your credentials. So we saw earlier on that we had the client secret and the client ID. You get those when you register your application. So I have an application in here already, but I could go ahead and register a new one. I could put a client ID in here, mix of numbers, letters, hyphens and underscores. The one thing that I found, the name, I had a problem when I set my name longer than 20 characters. So I reset it to under 20 characters and it seemed to work. I don't know if that was just an erroneous error, but certainly that might be something. If you have any problems, just try setting your client ID and your client name to maximum 20 characters. But the client ID and the client secret are the two parts that work as a pair to provide you a unique reference point for your application. So it doesn't matter if somebody else has the same client ID, because the client secret is going to be very, very different. You do need to put in a redirect URL, but it's not actually going to be used by us, so it really doesn't matter what it is. You could put foo.com, just point it to your own company website, for example. It really doesn't matter what you do with it. But once you've registered, you need to copy the client secret and the client ID. If you forget to do it, don't worry, you can just come in here and hit edit and go and get those details. So great, we've got some details, but we now got to actually create the connections for the translation authorization key, and then once we've got the authorization code back, we then need to be able to use that authorization code to make the communication out elsewhere. So developing your application, there's a whole load of documentation in here. You can read your way through it, but the key points really for me were obtaining an access token. And in here it tells you about access tokens, that they use at HTTP post. That was very, very important. On my request here, you can see that I've made sure this is set to a post. They're normally a get, so you need to make sure you put it as a post. I was able to find out here the client ID, client secret, scope and grant type. And here they're all required. These are the two that I have to set dynamically. And these two have got hard-coded names. So you can see in the parameters here, we're back to those that I put in the two hard-coded ones and then added in the ones that I need to set dynamically. And then I can see here I get a token request output properties. There's an access token, which is what I really am interested in. Token type, expires in, and scope. The rest of it I really don't mind about, but reading the documentation, I find the token is valid for 10 minutes. And when I use it, I need to set bearer plus a space plus the value of the access token to be set to the authorization header of the translation APIs that I'm going to call. So hence the code in here. When we call the authorization, that I'm setting the client secret and ID, and I'm then getting the access token, and then using the bearer plus a space plus the token. So the get simple value is a boolean if it's there, true or false, and you pass in the output property. So I've got a string here that takes the access token. So that allows me then to pass it through to the parameter by name that I'm going to be calling through the other requests. And the authorization parameter here, so if we just jump back in here to the parameters, I've set the do not encode property on here. Because it's already encoded as it's returned using HTML encoding, I don't need it to be encoded. By default, the other parameters are not encoded, so it will encode those to HTML. So if I've got special characters or spaces, it will swap the spaces for %20 and all that kind of stuff for me automatically. So I don't need to worry about the web encoding. The components will do that, making my life very, very easily. But at this point, I don't need to actually re-encode something that's already encoded because it will make it invalid. So that's just, I've set the kind and I've also set it to do not encode. I've also then used this tnet encoding here just to decode a URL. It's a static class that was introduced into system.net encoding. It's a new XE8 library. If you're using this in XE5 or above, then you'll just need to take those lines out because that's not supported there. But that's a really, really useful way to be able to encode and decode both URLs and also HTML and base64 encoding. So a really, really useful class. Anyway, so once I've got the value set for the authorization token, I can then just go and call the REST API. The translate one here, I was able to go find the HTTP interface here, read through how to use this and find the HTTP methods references. So there's a whole set of methods here that you can use. You can probably go ahead and start playing with some of the other ones yourselves. The ones that I have done, the speak method and the translate. So the translate method here is a get method, and here's the base URL for it. And these then are the parameters that are passed in, what's required and what's not required, and then also it says that there's the request header, which is called authorization, which is required, and that goes in the header section. So again, just telling us about that parameter. So I've got the app ID is actually not required, leave empty if you're using if you're using the access token, which we are. And then we've got the text from to, the context type, which is just plain text, HTML, and then category, which is optional, which we can use. So it tells us a bit about the strings, what's going to be passed through here. It's also actually quite nice that there's some C# examples. Although it's not a Delphi example, we can actually read this relatively simple. You know, they're both written by the same father of languages in essence. So here we can see the URL that's being encoded, the parameters that are being passed through. So that actually was quite easy to go read and work out how it works and the process, the workflow through the code in terms of setting the client secret and ID, the values being passed through, and that being passed as a post to be able to get the data and come back. So anyway, using this, the from to, I was able to go ahead then and set up the additional parameters on here. We've got the text text from to, and the parameters, you can set them automatically and they'll be created automatically if you use this squiggly bracket part, and that then just goes ahead and set those parameters, and then obviously we're then just ready to go call it in code very, very simply. Now the data that comes back from the translation service is actually an XML string, but in the example I've actually kind of taken the components that are used in this sample here and converted this into one component for managing the authorization token and keeping the lifespan of that working, and then creating a base component that then we have descendants from to run the different service APIs off it, and which then know about the authorization component. That's all in here as a set of components for you to go ahead and use. There's a sample of how to use it. You just need to put in the form, create your client secret and your client ID into the authorization token manager, and you then just use that here as a translator languages, which is another one of the APIs which I haven't covered in this session, which you can go call and bring the data back from. But all of that works really, really well. The XML part in here is just using standard XML documents that's been around for a long, long time. Being able to use that to convert the XML value that's taken from the JSON data set and convert it into a normal string for you, which is quite nice as well. So all of that work is done for you, so you can then just go ahead and, well, on here you can, it brings you back a list of all the translatable languages, allows you to put some text in, it will translate it from one language to the other, and also then just be able to play specific text that you've got back out to audio, just using the play method. So it's been a pretty full session. I could probably do another 20 minutes on the actual components and the bits that are in there just to complete it through, but there's a great session that Jim Keefe did on one of the skill sprints earlier on the REST and JSON clients. So if you want to go through that, and you can see how some of the other authorization components work. There's a huge amount of really good stuff in DocWiki on the actual REST components. And then obviously for the translator service, the Getting Started page is a great place to go. So we're going to be back with the next skill sprint on Tuesday next week, and I'll be joining you again, talking about the very exciting interbase change views and how you can actually get the deltas of what's changed in the database as they're happening using the interbase events. So you get a callback from the interbase server when something's changed to the data that you're interested in, which is really kind of taking change views onto the next step as well, which is great. So I look forward to seeing you then. We've got some great offers running, especially with the run up to Windows 10 coming through. There's the Macro Cantu Object Pascal handbooks available, some premium styles. So definitely make sure you get your update subscription running with any upgrades that you do. That's going to be really important to make sure you get all the new cool stuff that's coming through later in the year. And now time for some Q&A.
If there's any questions for Stephen right now, go ahead and type them into the chat, the question area, and we'll get your questions answered for you right away. So the first one I see here, it says, we'll work through the provided examples, did not understand very much from the video. So I guess if there's something specifically to understand, Peter, go ahead and ask that now, and we can get Stephen to elaborate on that. But essentially, from what I understood, maybe go through this again, is that it's a process of connecting to the Azure service, doing the authentication through OAuth, and you send it the text, it translates it for you and gives it back, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So basically, there's a hosted service that Microsoft provide, and they have a whole host of different services that allow you to access into different data that does different things. But the service that I've been through here is just consuming the translation service. So to do that, the typical approach with REST is there's a service that you call to get an authentication token, which is the first step that I went through, and doing that, there's different kind of parameters that you need to set up to actually be able to pass the right data to get that token back in the first place. And then we looked at how to get the token out of the resulting data set, and then prime up the other components that are exactly the same components but calling a different API, which is the actual translation API, which you need the token to be able to call in the first place. And because of that token, you can't get access to it. And then we just went ahead and called it. And then just right at the end, I kind of briefly pointed out some of the sample project that's in the Code Central download there that basically I've wrapped up the API ready for you to go ahead and use, and given you a base class that if you want to call some of the other functions that are exposed by the translation service, that you can go and do that very, very quickly and easily. But those components have a class in there to enable easy management of that auth token, because the auth token is only valid for 10 minutes. So at the end of 10 minutes, if you try to keep on using that auth token, then it will die. So you just need to kind of keep getting a new auth token every few minutes.
Okay. One thing I like about videos like this is that it shows how to use the components we're already familiar with typically in some sort of new service, which I appreciated. Peter said that if there was a data flow diagram, that would have been very helpful to show where the data is going, the different stages along the way. So.
Yeah, cool. Always good feedback. The other thing, Peter, if you kind of want to get to grips with the REST components a bit further, then I'd certainly say go back through some of the skill sprint videos. Jim, you did yourself a session a while back on using the REST components and how they work. So I was really trying to make sure that we didn't repeat some of the old kind of content that had been done. But thank you for the feedback.
Okay, great. I don't see a lot of questions here specific to your session, Stephen. So some good feedback. Excellent session. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, etc. So I learned a lot. It was definitely very good. It's something I'm going to actually play with, because something I thought about a while ago, trying to figure out a way to do that. I was thinking about using the Google translation services, but this one worked just fine. So.
Yeah, well, one of the really fun things to actually play around with is the and I've wrapped up the components in the sample that you can go download. Just the links in the chat. Was using the play. So they've got one method called translate and the other one that's called play. And when you call the play one, it returns you back an audio file, and you can then literally have that spit that straight out your speakers. So getting it to say Delphi rocks in a few different languages with different voices is actually quite, and different languages have different voices set up against them. So it's actually quite entertaining. I actually kind of lost half an hour of my time at one point just seeing what the different languages sound like, saying Delphi rocks, which was kind of fun.
That is cool. Now I have a question for you. Is there a licensing that you have to do, or is that all included in the service as far as being able to use that audio and other reasons?
I didn't delve deeply into the licensing. Basically, there's 2 million characters a month that you can get for free to embed into whatever you're doing. So, I just kind of went ahead and just used some of that for playing around with that. I honestly didn't spend much time looking into the details of the licensing for the service.
It would probably be best everybody just talks to their lawyer anyway, because I'm sure the analysis you do would probably.
Well, I'm sure it's all up on the Amazon service. But it's a service you can reach publicly anyway. Just open up a copy of Bing web browser, and you can actually use that service directly from the Bing search engine. So the fact that it's already up there in public and being used is kind of cool that they share the APIs and make it available for you to improve everything else around.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Stephen, for another great session. And we're looking forward to seeing you again next week for the Interbase Change View session. That should be a great session. Lots of cool features in Interbase.
Oh yeah, change view is just the amount of feedback we get from people who are showing change views and just picking up exactly what's changed at a field level, and then it's really nice to kind of share it with the whole of events that have been around in Interbase for years, and allow the database to tell you when something's changed without you having to constantly poll. It makes a huge difference in terms of network speed, performance, and getting lifetime data back up on the screen to the customer, which is great.
I love Interbase has all these great little features like that, but then the fact that you can take all those features to the mobile device with Interbase to Go is just really, really cool. So
Yeah, well, and change views is kind of it's we're patent pending on that. It's a brand new way to be able to track changes, and it brings something very unique to IoT, to the Internet of Things, for being able to connect up to a lot of different devices, subscribe to the same data, and being able to keep your data cache updated on a mobile device, even when you've been disconnected. Getting the server to tell you what's changed in your briefcase, that's pretty awesome. So yeah, it's an amazing technology to have around, and yeah, I can't wait to show it again next week.
yeah, I'm sure most people on the line that have done database development in the past have tried some of the different tricks of setting timestamps and doing queries based on indexes and stuff like that, trying to find the stuff that's changed, and it never quite works exactly right. Usually there's lots of extra effort you go through and never get completely perfect results. So it's nice to have that baked right into the database. That's a really important feature to be able to get access to.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you so much, Steve. We're going to let everybody go, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Okay, take care. Happy coding.